welcome to Recovery Authors. It's a real honor to have you here. In fact, I want to apologize to listeners in advance because when I get done reading Scott's bio, we're just going to have to end the show because that's all the time we're going to have. But what really amazed me, though, is what you sent last. That was really cool. I'll just read this. So I got this email from Scott, Scott Smilie here, joining us today. And boy, super cool to see this stuff. All right, so Scott wrote, you and I have known each other 37 years. We met in 1984 when you came back to visit after your dad took over Boone, Lenoir, and presumably Marion, right? Those three.
I don't think it may have been. That's been a long time ago. I know that there were two. I think my dad had started a Marion campus, and I don't know if someone else had taken that over. And then when your dad came in, they all got looped together.
That sounds like that's what it might have been happening. Yep, sure. Yeah. So anyways, in addition to that, we had, our dad presided over similar churches in the same area, at least. And then SEP, which is Summer Educational Program in Orr, Minnesota. And I'm sure you've got some good stories from that period. And then, of course, the one that, I always remembered your name and your family, and that you and I were the eldest, of two PKs, pastor kids.
Yeah. And
we had our share of travails and so forth. But when I got to know you, I think it was at Ambassador University. And you were a year or two ahead of me, I believe.
I had gone to college a year before I went out to Ambassador. And so I was just out there 2 years. And,
okay. So you came through in 2 years and grabbed up the bachelor's, I'm assuming.
No, I got zero degree from Ambassador. In fact, that's like a whole separate story of I had to appeal my way to get an associate's degree from the community college back in Florida, because I had a lot of credits from the community college. I'd go back every summer, and I'd taken some classes in high school. And so because I needed to have an in-state degree to get into the physical therapy program at the University of Florida.
Of course. Yep.
And so that was the way that door opened for me to actually get into the bachelor's program. And I was the last class that you have to get a bachelor's degree, because after that, physical therapy went to a master's program, and I think it's a doctoral program now.
Ooh, you skated in there. Now, something you may not have realized, so you were obviously caught in that last semester when Ambassador University came to a screeching halt. Yes. I'll never forget, I went home for winter break, and while I was skiing in New York, I got a letter from the university saying, due to some doctrinal differences, we'll be closing the campus after the next semester. And so I too worked to get an associate's from there, because I didn't want to leave empty-handed. I went there for 4 years. I felt like I got screwed, but I still wanted to take something with me. So what I ended up taking with me was not only an associate's degree, which was ultimately the least meaningful thing I ever did in college, but the student debt, because I discovered only after I got the degree that they forgave all the debt of all those who did not get a degree.
Oh, I don't even think I knew that. Wow.
Yeah. Cheers.
Wow. Yeah. One good deed never goes unpunished, I guess, huh?
Yeah, right. So that was kind of my first introduction to, all right, this is how college works. But from there, what I want to do is give you a full introduction, Scott. And like I said, I feel completely inferior and insecure around you after I read this. But here goes. This is Scott Smilie, ladies and gentlemen. He is the co-founder of Life from Heaven, an online platform discipling people into the rest of God, which runs flesh-free Christianity membership. We'll dive into that. I want to know what that means. You've also got this is something I'm going to say for the end, so people have to wait to get. He does a free daily declarations. We'll give the website away at the end. Scott is also an executive pastor of the Resting Place Church. In 3 years, he's grown 3 locations in the Tampa Bay area and 3 multi-sites, including one in Germany. That's amazing. And I'm assuming that stays in English.
Yeah, it's so as the executive pastor, I'm sort of the second in command behind our senior pastor. And so we had an Army recruiter here. And when he got reassigned to Germany, we had taken some of our COVID strategies and with the social media elements and what it looks like to do church online, and started going, hey, we can do this virtual teaching. And then why do you show up on a Sunday? And we really started like asking those sort of questions of what is it, why should someone come to church on a Sunday as opposed to just watch it online? And it's community, it's relationship, it's that pastoral connection that you get from being known, having a place to experience community. And so we realized that we could create microsites where if we have someone who is very pastoral in nature, they can invite people in to their home. We can provide, and Kristen, who's there, she's very musical, and together she can do worship, and then they play a video that we record specifically for our microsites to bring the teaching that we're doing live here into multiple locations.
That's amazing and fantastic as well.
We haven't had anybody else really doing it in this format.
And yet it's easy to assume that in a couple of years that'll be the primary format. So kudos to you for that. Yeah, I mean, that or another variation. It'll be interesting to see how all that shakes out. These have been trying times for you as a pastor then, haven't they? Just kind of.
Well, to be honest, we're very grateful to be in Florida, where a lot of the restrictions have been less, and we've felt that we've been able, to steward our flock, our team here. And so we were only closed about 6 weeks.
Wow, that's fantastic. What capacity are you at now?
So we're fully open in 3 locations.
No way. That's terrific.
It's been good. We're growing. We typically run between 3 locations. We probably got about 250 people at this time. And but it's amazing just the connections that the Lord has been bringing. Our Caleb has been down in Miami, worked with a Brazilian church down there. There's just been a lot of opportunity. We've got some, diversity on our staff. We have one of our campus pastors is a Korean American, one's Puerto Rican, and the other one, are Mexican. And so we've been able to have this diversity that is really part of the Tampa flavor of a city that has such a diverse background. And we've been able to empower people into these leadership opportunities. And so we feel like coming out of this COVID season, we're really poised for growth. And
now, when you say coming out of COVID season, that's not a trite phrase to you, is it?
No, I mean, we're grateful. We had some of our friends, even in Orlando, their church lost 90% of its revenue because people stopped coming. And we just flatlined because we had been on this growth trajectory as a new startup, and it kind of flattened, but we didn't really drop. And so it was, and part of that was the way we had set things up. People were already giving online. And so if you had a long history of like, I show up at church and I throw my offering in the plate as it goes by, you take that away, and then there's a disconnect between what I do with my money and the church. And so it's, 60-70% of our people give online. It doesn't change for them.
That is shocking. Actually, I almost wish this was a marketing podcast right now because holy cow, that really speaks to, I mean, I remember when they first started doing it at the church I was attending 5-6 years ago, they said, all right, everybody take out their phone. And to be honest, I was like, ew, that's not cool at church. The pastor's saying this. And then he walked them through how to use the app and set up automatic donations. And look at that. Now, you know, COVID comes along, man.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's you know, COVID's really shaken, like, all right, what is it that you do? Why do you do what you do? Like, we sat down as a team and had all those kinds of questions of going like, you know, like I was saying earlier, why do you show up on Sunday? What is it? What's the value that church offers? Why, you know, it's a primarily volunteer organization that's driven by donations. And so if you don't have a clear, compelling vision that makes people go, all right, I've got to shut most of my life down in this lockdown period. Why stay connected?
Yeah. And then man, I'll tell you, that's beautiful. There's a lot we could dive into there. Before we go though, I want to finish this because we still didn't get through all this. Scott. So I think I got to, let's see. Okay. I got to Germany. So you're also a co-founder of, and one of the teachers at the Jesus Lab, an experientially focused school of supernatural ministry. Definitely want to talk about that. We're not, and then we've got 4 questions. Goodness, it's gonna have to be a 6-part podcast, which would be great for me. I don't know about for you. It seems like you have too much on your plate to devote too much time here, but we'll do our best. Let's see. And then, of course, Scott, you're an attorney, corporate and real estate, in-house for 16 years, executive pastor, entrepreneur, and a licensed physical therapist, although you haven't officially, I'll throw that word in, you did not officially practice. You've unofficially practiced for sure. Physical therapy, that's so cool. And let's see, I don't think I mentioned your children and family yet. Goodness, I missed this as well. You're a co-founder of Green Meadow Group, a single family and multifamily developmental company that is focusing on green residential projects. And in all your spare time, you're an adjunct professor for Liberty University, teaching business law in their MBA programs, as you have for the last 11 years. Now, my favorite part, you've been married for 20 years in the August of this year. So congrats on that. What Thank a milestone.
You. It is.
You have 3 children, Gideon, 12, Luke, 10, and Isaac, 8. Yeah. I guess my biggest question to you, Scott, is, why become a pastor? Having grown up as a child of a pastor and having gone through whatever you went through, how did that happen?
So growing up, I made an inner vow that I would never be a pastor. I was like, I've been in this world, and God, I don't want to be a part of this.
Now, before you go, let me just say something for the listener. If for those of you who don't know, Scott and I were part of not just any church, but a church which today is defunct, split up, whoever knows. And it is also, I know for certain, it's studied as part of a program on cults. So that's where we came from.
You know, it's Jesse, it's really funny because having now been a pastor, after vowing to never be a pastor, which I had to repent of and break that vow, but I've come to realize that we felt like we were like the one true church, and that everybody else had it wrong, and that we were it, which is part of what makes a cult a cult. But there's a lot of organizations that are not considered a cult that are very similar in the level of control, the level of manipulation, the level of exclusivity. And so as I've worked with people in it being in a more, we're in a charismatic but evangelical stream of churches, in working with people, I keep going, like, I felt like I was so unique in this like nutty church that I grew up in. And then I start hearing people's stories and I'm like, I think Solomon said that there's nothing new under the sun and everything is common to man. And
Shakespeare said that before Solomon, just FYI.
I saw it on a meme, right? The internet never lies. And so that it's been interesting processing like our growing up and the sacrifices that we made, like, Sabbath keeping, for me, that was like, I swam in high school up until district meet was on Saturday. And that's when I pulled the cord and I'm out. I can't do it because that's not part of the church rules. And I had one day in high school where I went to play club volleyball on a Saturday. I forgot my wallet and like I was starving. One of my friends bought me like a veggie sub from Subway just to have mercy on me. It was horrible, but it was cheap and they were
how much mercy that is.
And I was like, I knew that was the wrath of God because I was breaking the Sabbath.
Yes.
And so struggling like with all the kind of the guilt and working through what does freedom look like. And so that's something that as I had to deconstruct like all the theology that we learned growing up and all the eschatology and what does it mean, like, all right, Jesus is coming. Yeah, but the first time he was supposed to come was the year I was born, in our structure. And now, here we are, 40 plus decades late or 4 decades later, still waiting.
Yeah. So that was one of the, there were many odd beliefs. One among them, of course, what Scott's referring to is how from Friday night sundown to Saturday night sundown, much in the Jewish tradition, there's to be no activity, right? It's a time of rest. It's a time of no electronics, no TV, and just reflection. Man, I wish I had an iPhone back then, huh? The lines are blurred. But unlike you, I think this is an interesting point to take for a second. I was strictly not allowed to do anything on the holy day. So I wanted to play basketball. That's kind of my favorite sport. And it was just a no, you can't do that. You're telling me that you went and brought down God's wrath. but
once.
But who? So what was your parents' stance on that, if not control?
They were very unhappy about that. I was missing church to go do that. And so that was a one-time thing that we had a family in our at our worldwide church location there in Melbourne, Florida. And as some of the kids had gotten older, they were starting to stray away from the truth. Right. And do all these worldly things like play volleyball on Saturday. And which in hindsight is it's so crazy, but when you're neck deep in this stuff, and so this girl and her non-church boyfriend.
That was a big one too.
That's right.
Had to date in the church. Yep.
That's right, and that was a whole separate mess because it was like, there's only like 3 families in our church that had any girls in for the dating pool.
Yeah, that's how my dad and mom got together. They were kind of like 2 of the leftovers, odd ends at the end of their 4th year, and so they're just like, "Hey, you want to try it?" Right. After 31 years, they divorced. There you go.
It's tough. It's tough to navigate, but really we were quirky in those elements, but what I'm finding is like we're working with, people that are coming out of Hispanic churches, and some of the control that they were telling me that they're experiencing, I'm like, I know that. It's just, it looked slightly different, but that same level of like, you don't do anything without the pastor's blessing. And, you know, we made fun of the Catholics because, you know, we thought the Pope was going to have them, you know, lead the beast and all of this stuff. But the level of control that you would bring to your local pastor, like our dad's, was not far off of what we were accusing the other people of.
What's the yeah, no, that's very true. I grew up with this intense longing to be a part of something bigger than what we had at the church, you know. And sadly, there was this incredible sense of inferiority and being excluded, you know, because I mean, I remember this. There's one ridiculous story. So we had this one holy day called the Days of Unleavened Bread, and every year Mom would have to clean the entire house. She'd make us help her, and the goal was to get rid of all the yeast and the leavening that made bread puff up, because that symbolized our egotism and sin and all this other stuff. So we had to get the bread out of the house. We threw away, it was always a big deal. We'd throw away the loaves of bread and then take the trash outside of the house to get it off our property. And then for 7 days, we just ate, what was that brand?
Matzos.
Yeah, but they make wine as well.
Manischewitz?
Yeah, there you go. Manischewitz. Those shitty hard crackers with peanut butter or whatever. But I remember one time during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, I was at my friend's house and they were eating and they had Whoppers. And I just picked mine up and took a big bite. And I realized what I did. I spit the food back out and looked around. My face turned red and I ran out of the house.
Yeah. No, I remember peanut butter and jelly matzos.
Yeah, but that was, and then there was so much, man. It's hard not to get on this rabbit trail fasting.
Yeah.
Ooh, but anyways, you did, while we're on the church topic, you did hit me with some amazing points here. So let me let's parry this one. Number 4, why I don't know if this is a typo. Why we evangelism? Is that correct?
Oh, why evangelism needs to partner.
Okay. What you got my attention with was the end of that. It says, why evangelism needs to partner with discipleship to avoid the Jesus MLM. That phrase got me. Tell me what Jesus MLM is. How do I participate? And how do I get people under me?
That's right.
How much money can I make in the first year?
Well, it's funny because in church circles, evangelism is a big deal, and a lot of times, what my observation was that I called it the Jesus MLM, and that was, if you can find 2 people who can find 2 people who can find 2 people, and make disciples out of them, and get them to say this prayer, then eventually the whole world will be evangelized, and Jesus will return. And so the emphasis became, how many notches on your Bible could you get to go, Jesse, I need you to say this prayer. Like, do you know where you're going to go when you die? What are you going to do? Like, and it just becomes this like haranguing, you know, because like when I didn't do a lot of litigation, but when I did, you know, we go to the courthouse and there's a guy standing there on the bullhorn with this big, like, do you know where you're going when you know, yes. Are you going to hell? And he's just like shouting at people and like, you know, reading out of, Genesis and Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah and fire and brimstone. And I'm just like, you know, the word gospel means good news. And whatever you're talking about is not actually that good. And your sales method sucks. And so, you know, it to me, when we get focused on just getting butts in seats in church or getting people to recite something, we lose the life-changing message that Jesus wants to come, not just die for you, but to die as you. And so that you have the opportunity to live from a spiritual place of unity with him and total redemption. And it's like, okay, well, that sounds a little esoteric, kind of nice. So what? Right. And so that's where the discipleship element comes in, of going, if you don't know who you are, you act like just the sum of your habits. Right. And there's not an intentionality to how you're approaching both life in general and how faith specifically affects what you're doing, why you do what you do, and how to move, on purpose through life.
The last bit you touched on there, I really, this comes up again and again and again, just how, like for my audience, a lot of people probably listening would say something like, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. And I think that a lot of people ride that, out of town because they have either been a part of or seen the carnage of something like we did when we were kids.
Yep. And
so there was a guy that put it really well. He's talking about how it's super easy not to look at an individual church. Let's say it's, not COVID times, and there's 400 people showing up at this church every week, and 360 of them are law-abiding citizens raising healthy families that are making the world a better place, doing business within the scope of their Christianity, which provides a framework for them to really make a difference with what they do, with their expertise, with their abilities and their God-given talents. So we like to ignore all that stability, which is awesome, which our society would be forever changed without, and look at the 40 or so people on the fringe.
Yep.
And how do you address that mindset with people who are ready to dismiss everything about God because of that?
Well, I would, just as you were talking about that, I was thinking about, talking about writing things out of town. Jesus got wrote out of town by the religious folks and who killed him. So I would say Jesus might be spiritual, but not really that religious.
Oh my. Good answer.
So, the tension is always, and I feel like probably social media has magnified our fixation on sort of the macabre, the extreme, the can you believe that? And our thinking habits have moved much more towards emotional addiction to outrage. And so,
don't get me started.
And so with that, then, it's easy to apply that to the faith community, because there's always people that are, on the fringe at one level of their journey. And so it's going, how do you, as a church leader, I'm going, how do we create a safe place for people to come encounter the life-changing presence of Jesus and how God works through people, while also protecting, the 360 people that you were talking about before that are just like, hey, we're connected, we're solid, but there's that one person that's doing something weird over in the corner, twitching, or depending on which denomination you're at, the person, maybe they're just putting their hands up in worship, and you're like, who does that? And then it's like, oh my gosh, there's someone over dancing in the corner, like with flags or something. And you go, all right, that's way off my grid. Right. And so there's this kind of spectrum of, the dancing flag people running laps at church, and those that if they bring their hands, out of their pockets during worship, that's a wild day. And
that's another good point. Are you a hand guy?
Yeah.
Nice.
I'd say at our church, we have people that do flags. We haven't really had any aisle runners, but we encourage people
a term that needs no explanation.
But, you know, the goal is we want to create a free place where people can express things, because what I've seen is, you know, what is it that that makes going to like a Tony Robbins event amazing? You have high energetic music. He gets you're moving. There's the
You're
kinesthetic
expected
element.
to stand on top of your chair. That's a requirement.
Yeah, and so there's a kinesthetic element of engagement that I think when we take a highly, if I use a big word, you know, highly pedagogical teaching, like the boss is up front giving you truth and you sit there and take notes, which is, you know, how we grew up.
Yeah.
That provides one level of academic understanding, but if what you're looking for is a changed life, you got to go, how do you help someone deal with the lies that they believe? How do you shake them out of their complacency? Because we change either primarily through pain, but also through having a very crystal clear vision of what could be. And so when you have this potential that looks amazing, you might actually go, oh, what if that was true? 90% of us are still motivated by pain. Like, this part of my life sucks, and I'm finally at a place where I'm willing to deal with the habits and lies that I have in order to initiate a breakthrough.
Wow.
And so in church, we're trying to navigate this tension of going, what are the paradigms where you're kind of just locked into that rote, I go to church on Sunday, live like hell the rest of the week, to you know, actually having what we all hope to have, which is integrity, to be unified, both body, soul, and spirit, and Sunday through Saturday.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Did you well, hold on, let me go back to this here. Then I'll get a little bit off book here. So I have a business card I just gave somebody who was at my house. And it's a really bad business card. You're a businessman. You'll see the flaw in this. The card, it has my name and my business on the front of it. Mm-hmm. Now on the back, it says, I'm with God, but that's a whole nother thing. That's just a conversation starter. But as I said on the front, it's got my name and my business name. That's it. So I told the guy that I gave it to, I said, here, let me write my number on this. I give this to people I don't want to do business with. Because my thinking is, you know, they'll say, oh, the dummy didn't put his number on it, so I won't call him. So if people really are determined, then the card pays off. But you've got something here that says, all that to say, why don't you put a fish logo on your business cards?
So in when the real estate market dropped back in 2008-9, and I was running a foreclosure defense bankruptcy practice in 2010, 2011, I marketed primarily to Christians who are struggling financially.
Okay.
And in that, I found that so I was running a small firm. I'm reaching out to the community. I'm doing all the marketing and talking to people. And I would come across people that had like the fish on the fish logo, the ichthys, you know, and it's like, hey, I'm a Christian. And what I found was a lot of times Christians will use, hey, I'm a Christian. In the banking world, they'd call that as a credit enhancement. Right? So I'm going to trust you sooner than I would someone I don't know, because you said the magic phrase, I'm a Christian. So automatically I assume that you might be competent, that you will honor your word. I might not need as thorough a contract or vetting. And I got burned so many times on these sort of things. People wouldn't pay, they'd slow pay me, they'd like all these things. And I'm like, I don't really. And as an attorney, there's
this
that
is not working out.
Yeah. The feedback was like, is this really what I want to do? Because they were covering at one level a need to grow their skills, with a social enhancer. And so I want my businesses to stand on their own as competent businesses of excellence, that you go, I want to do business with that guy. Why? Because he can get the work done. And it's nice that he's going to be ethical. He's going to be straightforward. Because I had people like, do you know another Christian attorney that does this? Whatever it is I wasn't doing, right? I didn't do family law. I didn't do personal injury. There's a lot of things that I was like, I'll refer that out. But they're like, I'd like a Christian attorney. And I'm like, I can refer you to an ethical, competent attorney. That's who I would like to send you to.
No. I want the one with the fish.
That's right. So I'm like, okay, off you go.
Yeah, I tell you, as soon as you start telling me that you're honest, or especially in negotiations, or you want a long-term relationship, you all these things, it's just man, I gotta run the other way. Are you enjoying that I'm going backwards through your question list, by the way?
I put those out there just because I was like, this will give us a springboard to see where we end up.
I hate to see where this went if it was off script.
We'd be talking about college.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, man, it'd be hard not to go back to WCG though before that, I think. And I'll tell you, by the way, I'm kind of having a hard time seeing you. Like, I see you there with the white background, but I'm struggling to see you as a pastor or as a lawyer or as a businessman. And you're all three of those things. And then you're a licensed therapist as well. So my brain's just confused right now. I just want to let you know.
Well, so that, this is where, like, when you go through life and you find, like when I was in school, both starting in high school and through early college, because every school seemed to have different requirements, I ended up with like 4 different humanities classes that never counted for this. Like, there was Western Civ art, which was different than Western Civ history, which was different, so I had all these things. But the thing that I got fascinated with the most was the concept of being a Renaissance man. And this idea that, in the Renaissance period, so that's the Michelangelo, the Leonardo da Vinci kind of period, there was a real value on being a well-rounded person. So they would learn medicine, they would learn, fighting, they would learn science, they would be widely read, they would write poetry. Like, there was this value on going like, how do I be well-rounded? And so that really stuck with me. And so I started in the medical side with physical therapy and loved the 6-month cadaver dissection lab that I had. And so we're in the basement of the hospital there in Shands at the University of Florida. And, it was like our room, then there was the med students and the dental students. And I mean, we took the cadaver from skin to bones and dissecting it. And I loved it because one of my core values is discovery.
Yes.
But what I found was the actual practice of being a physical therapist, especially in the outpatient orthopedic realm, when you're dealing with like ACL reconstruction, there's not a lot of creativity or discovery. You're putting people through structured rehab programs that are pretty rote. And so, I probably should have moved into more like neuro or stroke rehab or some other element, but I had signed a non-compete contract. And so the way I got out of my non-compete contract was to go to law school. I didn't compete directly. And so I was like, if I'm going to own my own physical therapy clinic and I'm getting beat on contracts, I better learn something more about contracts. And the only way I knew how to kind of do that within, the non-compete circle that I was in was to go back to school. And so I went to law school with the idea that I would be a business guy, and even did a joint degree with real estate development. And but once I got sucked into the law school tractor beam, ended up coming out and practicing law for a large firm. But I did do real estate. We did financing for golf courses. And so there were some neat niches that I got involved in. But all of that kind of came about because I was interested in being a Renaissance man. And so the idea of going into medicine, then going into law, both of those were tied to this desire to be an entrepreneur. And, you know, whatever it was 20 plus years ago, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so I got fascinated by real estate. And so now I'm finally 20 plus years later, you know, a member in the Green Meadow group, and we're going to start doing real estate development.
Yeah. So what would you consider to be your primary occupation?
I don't even think of it in that way. I am. So actually, this goes to the first question, the first point that I had.
All right, good. All right.
Identity.
Don't skip number 2.
What's that?
You're skipping number 2.
Yeah, we'll get back there. But identity, who you are, and assignments are what you do. And so, like, you know, my identity is I'm a champion of freedom. And whatever I do, I want to be creating freedom. So like real estate development's about eventually building up a multifamily portfolio to create financial freedom. But as a pastor, I work with people to try to create spiritual freedom for them. As an attorney, I was, you know, working in different realms. When I was doing the bankruptcy foreclosure defense, helping them with their financial freedom because they got in, you know, way over their head. And so under that umbrella of a champion of freedom, there's different assignments. And so some assignments are clearly a part of who I am, and some of them are just meeting the needs that come up. And so, you know, like teaching is something that I value. And so teaching for like Liberty University has met some of my financial goals, and it's allowed me to you know, create a baseline understanding of the legal system for a lot of people who are wanting to go into business.
Okay, so I think I heard you say that Liberty is where you can get a fat paycheck if you want to work in that field.
I
no need to comment on that one.
Don't put words in my mouth, but they've been a very good place for me to work.
So yeah. So the question was, or the thought was, the difference between identity, who you are, and assignments, what you do. And I was just on a podcast called The Kids in the Room out with a friend of mine from LA. And he was making a really interesting point, because as you can imagine, you know, to be a bartender in a place like Los Angeles, and maybe you've got famous people buying drinks from you and leaving you tips, and maybe you work in one of these clubs that everybody wants to get into and few get past the velvet rope. When COVID hit, all those guys started committing suicide. Think about that. That was a total loss of, you know, who they were, and they didn't know what to do. And you know, I mean, some people might laugh at that example, but it really helped me consider, you know, the fact that when you strip away what I do, then, you know, what's left. A lot of people get up in the morning and go to work. I'm going to a funeral tomorrow from a woman who was a single mom, worked 3 jobs, raised 3 kids, and went to law school. And it's like, you know, most people can't do that. They just get 1 or 2 jobs, and that's all they do, and that's who they are. And you take that away. And yeah. So how do you? Yeah, and I don't know if I know too many people with more hats than you do. So I like that you've umbrellaized the system.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important. But
your point about the conflating of what I do with who I am is something that I observed, you know, and they've done a lot of studies. If you work, you know, 40 years for a company and retire, part of our whole retirement system, the way it's currently structured, was the plan was you're only going to live about 3 years after you retire, right? If you make it to 70, you're good. And now people are living, 15, 20 plus years past 65. And, I think a lot of times our financial system wasn't set up for that. Our health system outpaced our financial planning, but a lot of people died a couple of years after working, partly because they stopped. Who am I? I mean, we had growing up, I remember there was, I think there was an engineer, and once he retired, like, what, I'm going to just like golf. Like for him, that wasn't, I'm like, that would be me. But for him, it was like, I lost who I was and I can't figure out what I do now. There's no value. And so whether it's through suicide or just kind of a giving up, and kind of wasting away, people kind of lose that sense.
They get a Netflix IV.
Yeah.
Let's be clear, though, that's mostly men that happens to. Women seem to do great in retirement. So I don't know if I know we're stupider, but I'm not sure on all the reasons there. But
it's the testosterone that burns out the connection between your two hemispheres. When you're in the womb and it's a boy, the mother floods the baby with testosterone, and it actually, this is one of the things I learned in anatomy class. A man's connection between the two hemispheres is significantly smaller than a woman, which is why you end up with those like men are waffles and women are spaghetti kind of generalities, is because we can stay in like one side or the other because they're not talking to each other at the same velocity that like a woman's brain would be.
Fascinating.
I'm full of like nerdy tidbits.
Now, is your that's what we strive for here. Were your parents part of the influence that helped you become a modern Renaissance man? How did they influence that?
Well, my family valued education. So when we lived in North Carolina, my dad he got his master's degree in counseling from Appalachian State. When we were in Melbourne, my dad started commuting to the University of Florida to get his PhD in counseling.
Yeah, hold on. Did you say commuting from Melbourne?
Yes.
Okay.
So, Melbourne, Florida, not Australia. The value of education was really strong in our family. And so there was an expectation of learning, a value of learning. And with that, it just sort of, it created an atmosphere where when I got into all the Western Civ and humanities type classes, that was like a seed that it resonated with me because we valued learning to start with. We weren't like, my dad didn't watch a lot of sports. He watched Lawrence Welk like on Friday nights, which, that it was old reruns 25 years ago when,
right. Yeah.
45, 30, long time ago.
Time ago.
Back when you had to get up to change the channels.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So who would, you were the remote control. Who instilled more of a work ethic in you? Would you say your mom or your dad?
My mom would have, the chores around the house, those sort of things. As I got older, my dad was able to keep our lawnmower alive with, baling wire, bubble gum, duct tape, all those sort of things. And right. So I didn't connect with like a lot of the manual labor kind of elements. That was super frustrating for me. So I realized that I'd better do well in school because like I hated sweating in the sun.
Man, yeah.
And
so did your mom, would she check your chores like after you did them and make sure you did them right? Did she have any little sayings, do it nice or do it twice, anything like that?
I don't remember that specifically. I found though that like, in like kind of preparing for this, it got me thinking about like growing up. And I remember meeting you. We came back to visit one time in North Carolina, and but I was like, man, I have to like really pause and like blow the cobwebs off those brain cells, because I'm very forward focused. I'm very goal driven and going, all right, what's the next thing? And so, even these sort of questions, I'm like, oof, it would be a long, awkward pause on a podcast to be like, hold on.
That's why people listen. Sometimes I just string all the pauses together and play that as a preamble to the podcast.
Right. You got faithful listeners.
I do. It's a wonderful group of people. Let me go back to this. I want to get this last question, then we can really go out of town here. All right. This one says, having faith versus developing skills. Why many Christians? That's a great question. So why, Scott, are many Christians just getting by?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. One, growing up, our eschatology of Jesus is coming back at any moment, and we're on the inside, and life's going to be good when we enter the millennial reign, when we get to heaven kind of concept. It creates an unintended, I think, consequence that we're not super engaged in this world where we are today. And so there's not as much emphasis on developing like who we are and how our faith impacts long-term city. What's our city like? Is our city better because we have the churches in it? And if so, why? What is it that the church really brings to the community? And the reason I look at why many Christians are just getting by, if we're just going like, well, it's all going to burn, then I don't need to steward the environment. If it's all going to burn, I don't, well, for us growing up, we don't need to plan for retirement because, and so there's this stewarding element that, when you look at the parables of Jesus, he's like, how are you taking care of, the talents and the minas? Jesus is like, hey, I'm giving you these gifts that I want you to steward while I go away, and then I'm coming back. And how you steward that is a reflection on what's going to happen next. And we just get focused and we look at that and we go, it's just evangelism, right? So that's how we end up in the Jesus MLM that we were talking about earlier, and going, all right, if that's my goal, then I'm building up my residual income, in heavenly pavement and with streets of gold, right? And
you're going to name that street after me.
That's right. And so I think that there's part that we don't always, we're like, I have faith that God will provide. And it's like, he does, but he often provides by you learning a skill and adding value to somebody else's life. And we sometimes bypass that in the Christian circles because that feels an awful lot like work. And, I don't want a works-based theology. Well, the theology isn't works-based. It's a practical application of how do I serve the people that I'm in relationship with. And to me, when we get down to why many Christians are just getting by, is they're like, I'm just going to put enough effort into the things of this world, so jobs, money, stuff like that, that it falls short of excellence. And when you look, like when you read the stories in the Old Testament about both the tabernacle and the temple, those were amazing buildings. Like when the Queen of Sheba came to see Solomon, she was like, wow, your servants are amazing, how they did the food and how they were dressed and all these kinds of things. And you go, and excuse me, in our Christian circles, we're like, well, I don't want to be that concerned about what I wear, so I'll just look like a schmuck,
right,
and wear this like, these old clothes, or I don't want to dress up nice because it might intimidate somebody else. And it's like, no, the goal is to call people up into excellence.
yes.
And so if we're not, but you can't, it's sort of like the worst way to help poor people is to be poor.
I think that came from Kiyosaki.
he's one places. That, yeah.
One of many.
Some of those quotes are so far back there, they've just, I forget to cite the
Moses. We'll give Moses the original credit there.
Right. Because it's in a meme on the internet.
So do you think that people are just getting by because they're just not picking up on that motivation, or they don't see the point? Like,
I think that there's part that sometimes in the Christian circles, we've not done a good enough job communicating when we talk about the abundant life, it's really about dealing with your fears and what faith really looks like, and how to empower and how we address like our limiting beliefs, because it's like, I believe God is good, but I don't know if he wants me to get a promotion.
Right.
And so it's like, well, why? Well, because I'm not a good, I'm afraid that if I get too much money, I'll become vain and I'll become selfish and conceited. And so we have this internal tension, right? So James talks about how if you're double-minded, you're like tossed back and forth because you don't have this clarity. And I think a lot of Christians have confusion about how money works and how it works both here and how it works within the kingdom structure, because Jesus talked more about money than about heaven, about getting saved, like it's a very practical element. And when I do like coaching or any kind of discipling, talking about money is really like, you get to see pretty quickly where people land in their belief structures when you start going, is it okay to have a lot of money or not? Is it better to be poor?
Yeah.
You start seeing the gears, like smoke comes out their ears, like they're trying to figure out, is this a trick question? Like,
yeah. That's actually that touches on the reason I reached out to you, because I was reading something which I could never remember right now, but it was something about how evangelism needed to be merged with business in a dramatic fashion, because there is so much overlap, and it's important to pull the business leaders into the community of the church as leaders, not as outcasts that we just collect money from. Right. So I imagine that in your church, you're able to affect some change there.
Yeah, well, the way we approach things. So again, going back to like how we grew up and how I've discovered a lot of people grow up in church is your highest and best calling would be to be a pastor. And what I see in the Bible is the role of what we call pastors. In our church, we focus on what we call the fivefold ministry: apostles, prophets, teachers, evangelists, and pastors. And we believe that all five are in effect today. And because the work of the church is to equip the believers to do the work of God. So the church is supposed to be like an equipping teaching center for the actual ministers of the gospel, meaning every person that comes in is part of the ministry of the kingdom. And so when you're a business owner, when you're a teacher, when you're a nurse, whatever you do, your faith should be such that you are walking with God in a way that when you do a business deal, it's like Jesus is there with you. when you teach, when you're a nurse, when you're a doctor, when you're an engineer, whatever it is, when you're sweeping the streets, it's because that is a practical application and an advancement of the ministry of Christ. And
that's a great point, because I can think of someone offhand, and there's been dozens over the years. This gentleman had a successful consulting business, was doing good works, and had a website which was covered in Jesus fish, metaphorically speaking. But his goal was to quit his career so that he could become a full-time pastor. And, for me, I really struggled with that, because, if he pulled out of his industry, that leaves a void.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then the other thing too, I feel like, as you were talking earlier about this question, it seems to me that the real problem lay in the teaching, right? So it was really more about pastor problems, and guys like us, maybe, who'd continued in traditions from our parents, and let this continued misconception, that money is the root of all evil. That's like the favorite hammering point. It's not. It's the love of money. Okay. And even there, it's open for interpretation. So,
well, I mean, you get into it, like, for me, again, as a champion of freedom, I'm going, how do I help people get free? And poor people aren't free, and understanding how we deal with money, and that, to me, I'm a big fan of free market work, because it's one of the few ways, when you look historically, that people have been able to create income without violence, right? Because a lot of wealth accumulation comes from just going and conquering somebody else. Your neighbor does something well, and then you go take their stuff, and it's like, well, the free market and capitalism allows, at least at a basic level, fundamental level, the willful exchange, as opposed to a coerced exchange. And so with that, then we're able to multiply what God has given us. And, I've seen a lot of people, like, if I can just get to a place where I can leave the sphere of influence, where people know me, like me, respect me, and go into the church world, then I'll actually be doing what God has for me. And it's like that, you're giving up the influence and the ability to shape culture, to shape policies and procedures, to shape, what's the ethical nature of your company. One of the assignments that we have in our business law class is reviewing the Volkswagen Dieselgate issue, right? And so Volkswagen got hammered because their culture was driving. Now, it looked environmentally sustainable. It checked a lot of the trendy boxes where everybody was like, hey, that is so amazing. But at the end, what happened was, because the ethics were not promoted, someone along the line decided, well, we can cheat the system, and that's more effective than actually doing the right thing. And of course, at a certain point, you get exposed, and then your house of cards, it costs you a few billion dollars. So, we want to go, if you stay in your lane and don't feel like you have to come into the church world to truly do ministry, then you're able to actually touch people that would never come to church.
And there's fewer Volkswagens of the world.
Right.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. It's interesting how things come to us. There was a time not so long ago where inexplicably I got hooked into watching a Joel Osteen video. Is that his name, Osteen?
Osteen, yeah.
Yeah, the charismatic Houston pastor, who is not adorably known in a lot of circles for having what many call a prosperity gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there are a few outliers, right? Who maybe put dollar in their name or something like that, and maybe own more than one personal jet. So yeah, sure, that's those are outliers, but it sounds okay. So the rest of the story was, so I watched one video and I said, hey, this feels a lot like Tony Robbins on the one hand, and it has the good feeling. He's got a fish on his bumper that I wanted socially. And I was actually impressed by him. He didn't seem very earnest. Hell, I'd be happy if I was filling 2 stadiums every Sunday with donations. But to the bigger point, I didn't find anything wrong with it like I was taught as I grew up. And here's the kicker. You may know Dave Kish, good friend of mine. I had forwarded one of the videos to him, and in true old WCG fashion, he wouldn't even listen to it.
Yeah, Joel Osteen is an interesting person, but what I like and respect about him is he knows his lane and he stays in it. He's not like, you don't go to him for deep theology. Like, he's not like the professor, seminary professor who's going to take you into the Greek and Hebrew. That's just not him.
Very true.
But if you want to feel like God might actually like you, he's a great guy to go listen to. And so he's got his lane, and he's done exceptionally well staying in that lane. And everybody's like, well, he doesn't preach about sin enough. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. And it's like, I get that. But as someone who, you know, for like with our church, we're going to stay in our lane. And, you know, our core is lost, found free, peace reign in our city. And when you have very clear values, it's a beautiful double-edged sword, because you're either in or you're out. And when you have those crystal clear values of this is what we're doing, there are other good things, other great ministries, but they're not part of what we're doing. And so we'll say, if you want to go, you know what, if you want to go to Haiti, if you want to do African mission trips, if you want to do that, there's great organizations. That's not what we're doing.
Right.
We'll connect you with them.
That's another, man, this is such a wide ranging conversation, but I remember when I came home from Thailand 8 years ago now, there was a wonderful gentleman called Ray Renner who gave me my first job. I couldn't find a job being a felon. It was, you know, apply, get the job, then they do a web search on you, and then they don't call you. Right. And so for a while I was stuck there. And then finally Ray gave me a job at a place called Saxagata. He was the athletic director there. And I was in charge of youth basketball programs, which was, you know, I mentioned that just to pay homage to the man, because he did what nobody else would do at the time. But as I began working at Saxagata, I'm fascinated by church history, because that's who I am. That's, you know, what my father did for, I think 42 years before he retired. And what he did after, I want to touch on in a minute, but it was so sad because that church had a very traditional approach. Like you and I would have felt comfortable in that, having grown up in the church we did. You know, they sang songs. They didn't have a sermonette, but it was otherwise fairly similar structure. And at the same time, they were trying to cater to everybody. And so if you left the conservative church, you could walk around to the back parking lot, and they had another church back there where it was built like a rock stadium. And they had, you know, the equivalent of a rock concert every Sunday morning. And so you got this over here and that over there. And attendance just went out of both of them. Yeah. You
can't be all things to all people. Like, it's all about, in a sense, finding your tribe. And there's some people that want a much more traditional conservative church, there's some people that want a lot of research and how does this work, right? And there's other people that are like, just give me the fun. Like, if it's not fun, I'm not there. And
I just want the business connections and somebody to marry.
That's right. I want a country club church experience. Yeah. And so while I sort of chaff at the country club experience being tied to church, it is finding everybody's got every organization has a certain set of core values. And when you start to deviate from those and try to go, well, we like this, but we'll do that too, or we'll do, and it starts to pile up. And then you just have confusion as to what's your critical mission.
Where do you fall on a gay couple that attends church?
They're welcome. We won't marry them.
Okay.
But they're welcome to come.
Do any come?
What's that?
Do you have any in attendance now?
Yes.
Awesome. That's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, we have a very clear theological stance on marriage, but I'm trying to think of the phrase. We would be considered an accepting but not affirming organization.
One of the most delicate lines to tread in the world.
Well, it's tough because at the end of the day, it's I believe that there's a clear standard, but I also believe that we meet people where they are. And if the goal becomes, if you show up here, our goal is to try to strong arm you into an acceptance of our beliefs, then I don't think that one, I've not ever actually seen that work well. You end up with a lot of guilt and manipulation and a lot of people, especially now, I think our culture is one that is very sensitive to that, can smell it a mile away and has no interest in playing in that realm, which I think that's actually a positive. And so it really becomes I won't speak for the church. I'll speak for myself. My view is that if I can be in relationship with you long enough for you to hear the voice of God for yourself, he'll take care of any theological issues. And I may be wrong. Maybe between the two of us, there is the possibility, although I believe it's very remote, but I've been wrong once before. But last week, every day, but
ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here.
That's right. But it becomes one of those that if we stay open and we go, I have very firm convictions on what I believe, but I also hold to the fact that the Lord may give me direction on how to approach the people around me. Because if I believe that Jesus died for God so loved all the world, then if they fit into all the world, then God loves them. And I have to figure out how my relationship with truth becomes how I express truth in love. And that is something that I have to own in this process of going, all right, we're coming at, really core identity issues from different viewpoints. And going, if we can't find common places to connect, there's no conversation that's going to be productive.
That's true. That's true. I always feel for those smaller groups because I've been one of those. I've been a minority as a 45-year-old white male. It's not too often that I get to experience what it's like on the other side for a different race or. But yeah, having been in a minority, having experienced prejudice in a foreign country as an American, like I feel those issues, man. Like,
yeah,
if I were a gay male, I don't know where I would go for that. What church provides, it does provide that sense of community, and it can help, create a framework for living one's life, as you said, in integrity. And hopefully you get to know a lot of people that are like-minded along the way. Where do I want to take this? So many directions. I am curious to know a little bit more about, we've known each other for 37 years, but we haven't stayed in touch. And so let's go back to when Ambassador University shut down. You went to another school, presumably after that. Well, hell, you've been in school for a lot of times since in the last 30 years. Where did your father fall on that split? How did that impact your life? And maybe give the listener kind of an overview of how it, like, because it was two primary splinter groups, right?
Yeah. So Worldwide Church of God in the 90s started reviewing their theological stance, and it had actually started, I think, in the 80s. When the original founder of the Worldwide Church of God, Herbert Armstrong, passed away. There was an appointed successor, and there were some rumblings, some tweaks to the sort of quirky, theologically errant beliefs that we had. And but it wasn't until the 90s when his son Joe DeKotch Jr. took over that I think there was the real review of what is it we believe, why do we believe it? And so when
thank you for correcting me. That's exactly right.
And so we were out at Ambassador University, and at that point it was United Church of God and Worldwide Church of God still. And so a lot of people out at a school had gone on the United camp.
Yes.
And so there was this tension between sort of the traditions that the old Worldwide had, that United had held on to, and then the progressive evangelical movement that Worldwide Church of God was going through, and it's now called Grace Communion International.
Right.
And so while we were out there, my dad was moving more in track with Worldwide into the more traditional evangelical beliefs. And so by the time I got back after, because that last semester at Ambassador, it was sort of, that was a mess. I saw, for some people, the wheels on their theological bus really fell off. I think of one person, since this is public, I won't say who it was, but it was a very staunch, by the rules guy. You guys that going out and partying, you're just horrible people. And I remember that it was probably late January when we came back for that last semester, and I saw him, beer in each hand and a cigar and just like 3 sheets to the wind. And I was like, wow, what has this come to? Like it's just a shaking of the paradigms. And so when I came back to Gainesville and started at the University of Florida, we got into, I'm trying to think through the sequencing of that.
Where did your dad land ultimately?
So he stewarded the churches through the transition while they shrunk substantially.
Right. I remember those days. Goodness.
Yeah. So he had two churches that were, 125, 150 people to my recollection. And then they were down to 25, 30 people.
Same.
And so, as we went through that process there, I ended up going to a non-denominational church, but I found out later it was Undercover Southern Baptist. They had just taken the name off, and there were some people that were waving flags. So there was this little kind of charismatic streak, but overall we had just solid evangelical Bible teaching, and it really helped center me on kind of in the shifting from Sabbath keeping, dietary law, no shrimp, no pepperoni, no all of those.
No yeast week. Yeah,
that's right. And so, going, all right, how do I deconstruct what was erroneous, and then what is, what would be considered traditional evangelical beliefs? And so being in a church that was it was very teacher focused, very just solid, Bible exposition in a very practical way was really helpful. And then there was an unfortunate incident where the pastor was asked to leave. I think it was poorly handled. It wasn't a moral failing that should have, there was no infidelity, all these things. But they brought in this guest speaker named Steve McVeigh. And he was a Southern Baptist preacher who had an encounter with grace. And so he wrote this book, Grace Walk, and that just radically changed my view. He started going through Galatians and Ephesians and how much God liked you and how much you could have peace with him. And it wasn't about your performance. And growing up, it was all about your performance. Like you had to be good. And if you weren't good, you might not make it into the place of safety.
And we'll tell you about it.
That's right. It is everyone's moral obligation to, in today's world, show your YouTube, like worst clips, highlights.
There was a girl I spoke to a couple months ago about this old church stuff. And she told me that she was kicked out of the church for dating somebody who wasn't part of the church. I think she was 16 at the time. So
we took discipline very seriously.
Good luck getting her back into a room with God. Up until today, she won't do it.
Yeah. Because those are substantial rejections. And where we experience rejection, it takes a lot of courage to go, how do I heal this?
That's why I'm so fascinated with the idea that there could be a church that asked you to do things that no one else was doing, and then made this much smaller ask of asking you to believe that you were better than and different from the rest of humanity. To go from there to, oh my God, we're so sorry. All that stuff we made you do your entire life was wrong. Now, would you please mind doing all the things that life has taught you not to do? So the fact that your father made that transition, and it sounds like you guys made it arm in arm. I'm imagining you guys had some conversations as you were navigating that. It must have been interesting.
I think we were all on it together. I think that, we did have conversations about like, God, what was that?
Yeah.
Why did I have to give all that up if it wasn't necessary? And yet in hindsight, part of the way our family has made peace with, sort of coming from an extreme belief perspective, was that it created a safe place for us. And we were able to navigate one of the things that Herbert Armstrong did do as a leader was try to call people to a place of excellence. It would have probably been, I don't know if your parents had the same experience, but, some of the dinners that they had out in Pasadena, very fine china, gold plates, all of this to the nines kind of deal. Because he would go to, kings and presidents and things and going, maybe one day you too could have this level of influence. And so, most of the people that came to the Worldwide Church of God didn't come from that kind of background.
That's right.
I would, high society sort of experience. And so there was, between the Spokesman's Club, the speaking training programs that they had and things, it helped. It goes back actually to one of the things that I was talking about earlier. He actually focused on some skills, communication, living a life of excellence that actually translated over when we left. And then, so for us, we were able to focus on those benefits rather than, I didn't play any, I couldn't do basketball. I couldn't do, a lot of the things. I could only swim because most of the meets were on Tuesdays and Thursday afternoons after school, until districts when I dropped out. And so it's like, I don't know that I had a Michael Phelps kind of destiny that got short-circuited because of this, but I think for some people that really love sports, it was a much bigger ask than it was in our house.
I remember some kids wouldn't come because of sports. Yeah, that was a big thing. And again, I didn't have the choice. I think that's something I'd like to wind up on, is talking about how, so when I was a kid, I had to go to church. I had to stay home Friday night. There was never a question of, all right, you're a young man. You know what we'd like you to do, and we're not going to stop you from doing what you want. It was an authoritarian hand. And my dad, also a side note, if this is more interesting, he was also gone all the time. If we were playing in the yard and he got a phone call from a shut-in, let's say, come visit me, John, I want to feed you cornbread. He was gone, right? That church was his top priority. Excuse me. He was earning his way into heaven. And I suspect the authoritarian hand that he ruled over us was much the same that Herbert Armstrong ruled over his flock of pastors as well. Did you experience, and I know you were allowed to go play sports that Saturday, but.
Well, I did it. I wouldn't say that it was permitted or common at all.
No, especially among the ministry, because you were hurting your dad's reputation in a major way, right?
Yeah. No, in fact, I had one person, one of my peers' mom tell me, she was like, I don't know anybody. There's only one family that was more strict than your family in our church. And that family that was more strict, I mean, homeschooled, couldn't it was an iron fist. And, but we've, my mom and I have talked a lot about like how did, like, my sister goes to, Episcopal church. And we've, as a family, made the transition to general evangelical beliefs. And, when we kind of look through our Rolodex of people growing up, a lot of them are very disenfranchised with church, with religion.
Facebook, I still see there's a group I think we're both part of where there's some hot tempers in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and against people who are dead today. That's some deep resentment.
It is, and that's part of my journey was both personal healing, dealing with limiting beliefs, dealing with lies, processing regrets, and with the idea that there's more to life than the past, but we got to pull those anchors up in order to go into the future. And if we don't do that, well, then we get stuck emotionally. And the opportunities that are in front of us, which are often much greater than the regrets that are behind us, we miss because we're living life in the rearview mirror.
Man, I don't think I could have said it better. That was beautiful, Scott. It's true. Yeah, I mean, when we keep looking to our past, we're bound to repeat it. Boy, that was powerful. We are at time, my friend. I want to be respectful of your schedule, especially yours. You've got 60 jobs to do. I did promise listeners at the beginning that we would cover a giveaway of sorts from Scott. He's one of the many things he's doing is working as a co-founder of Life from Heaven, an online platform of discipling people into the rest of God, which runs, Flesh-Free Christianity. What is that, Scott?
So that actually came about from a Facebook post. I said, what's the number one thing limiting you from your walking with God? And everybody's like, me, myself, my flesh, I suck, I'm horrible. Because when you have, so it's funny, when you have a perfect God and you feel imperfect and, you know, have these challenges, you go, well, between the two of us, there's only one person that can be the problem. It's me.
Yeah.
I'm the schmuck, right? And so what we found was going, well, there's an educational gap in between properly understanding what Jesus did on the cross for you, and how when you choose to live, when you choose Jesus as your savior, he comes and actually lives in you. It says, I died and now he lives in me. And so there's this part of going, we have to process the old thinking patterns that say that I suck and I'm the problem and all these things, to go, I have eternal life living in me. And now I am getting to relearn how to live from a place where my union with Christ is not the end goal. My union with Christ is where I start, and I get to learn how to express that fully now, starting now, and then when I pass through the veil, forever with him.
There you have it. That's nice. I mean, somebody listening to this could get the misinterpretation that Christianity is sort of self-development, you know, in a sense. It truly is. And I don't think that's a bad interpretation necessarily. But anyways, flesh-free Christianity membership, this is from Life from Heaven, helps people out of the belief that they are flesh-free. And if, you know, and now I see why you've talked the way you have all this time, because Scott offers a daily free declaration. I assume these are all different every day.
So it's a one-page sheet, and it's got about 23 different I am statements.
Okay, can you give me an example?
I'm a child of God. I'm a champion. I am loved, and I love, and I'm inseparable from God's love. And so it just walks you through, and every declaration has a scripture behind it so that you can check and go, is this biblical? I'm a friend of Jesus. I had some people who longtime church people are like, no. He's a savior. I'm like this peon. And it's like, no, it's in the word. Jesus says, I call you friend. That's why I tell you this stuff. I don't tell my servants this stuff.
Yes. Awesome.
So it just kind of helps recenter you on who are you really as a Christian.
That's terrific. So you can download that. You can get all 23. If you go to the website, I'll read it now and it'll be in the comments below. IdentityDestinyCoach.com. Is that correct? Identity
Yes.
Destiny Coach. That's 3 words, .com. And so you can download that for free and connect with Scott. Is there a place, maybe on Twitter or someplace, where you prefer people reach out?
I am primarily on Facebook as far as social media goes. I've never got to figure out Twitter enough to. I have a place there, but I don't use it. But our group, Flesh Free Christianity, is an easy place to connect. I'm active in there.
Wonderful. Okay, so search for Flesh Free Christianity on Facebook and connect with Scott. Leave comments in the space below. We'd love to hear feedback, and hopefully we'll have Scott on again, where he'll have completed 6 more degrees and made me feel way more like a complete imbecile. I have wasted my entire life.
No, we're all on our journey.
But anyways, man, this has been a real honor and a pleasure. I see you doing incredible things. It makes me feel good to know you and to be a part of your world, small part anyways. But best of luck to you with everything you're doing. And is there any parting words you'd like to?
Well, one, just thank you for having me on. It's been neat to see how our lives have kind of touched, and then there's space, and touched, and then there's space. And it's amazing to see how God continues to work in our different journeys. And so just, a last word would just be, the Lord loves you. He's not mad at you. He's madly in love with you.
That's good. That's good for a lot of our listeners to hear. Well, thank you for that, Scott. And as always, be well and bless your family.
Thank you, Jesse. Same.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'll be calling you up for some parenting tips here shortly.
Sounds good. All righty.
All right, Scott. Thanks again. Take care. Have a wonderful weekend.